Poor Beck. Yes, hello, welcome to Disorganized Detectives. Fuck with Detective Computer. We just recorded a whole episode that was like an hour and a half long and it had stopped recording halfway through.
It's gone.
It's gone. Goodbye. So today we are in...
You look so terrified.
Yeah.
It's okay. If you're too loud, we'll just cut it out. Or leave it in and laugh.
We are in Chicago, Illinois. Is that where like Chicago is?
I don't know.
Oh, well.
Is it?
I think so.
I think Chicago is Illinois.
Chicago. Because a lot of places that have like the same name.
Chicago on Lake Michigan in Illinois.
Okay. So we're
is among the largest cities in the US.
Well, we're in Chicago.
Chicago.
With the case of Mr. Richard Speck.
Richard Speck is ringing some bells, but they're far back bells.
You'll get to a certain point like,
I'll have the light bulb moment.
Yeah.
I ate too fast and now I'm feeling...
Yeah. You're gurgling.
You may need to cut out some burpees.
Like all my sniffs the other week.
Oh, I ate way too fast. Let's not do lunch in between recording ever again.
So we have Richard Benjamin Speck, who was born on the 6th of December 1941.
Dick Speck.
Dickie Speck, in Kirkwood, Illinois, about 200 miles west of Chicago. So not in Chicago. Richard was the 7th of 8 children to Benjamin and Mary.
Oh,
that's a lot of kids.
Benjamin and Mary.
I feel like in the
Poor Mary.
Like, no one had anything to do but make children.
Did they not have televisions? No, it was the No, they wouldn't have had television in the 40s.
They would have some fucking cards or board games or some shit.
Do something. Get a hobby.
It
doesn't include your legs being open, Mary. Yeah. 8 is too many children for one person.
8's a lot. But then again, like Jay has a massive family. Jay's one of 2.
Still think it's a lot.
I think his uncle had 6.
Jesus.
And then his auntie had like 7. 6 or 7. And then he's got like him and his sister.
One of my aunties has 4 and that still blows my mind.
4 is a lot.
4 girls.
But then each of those, like all these cousins have kids.
Yeah.
Like Logan was the 30th great-grandchild.
Great-grandchild.
And now there's 2 more since Logan was born.
Damn, because Harry was the first great-grandchild for my dad's side of the family.
Yeah.
But the 5th on my mum's side of the family.
That's not like, I don't know, right? Like Logan's a 4th great-grandchild because my cousin's got 3 girls.
Yeah.
And then I had a kid and none of the other cousins have had kids. But yeah, he's the 30th. And now there's 32 great-grandchildren and his cousin's pregnant at the moment.
Right.
So they just keep adding. I couldn't imagine doing his family tree and it would just like, it would look like a fucking triangle.
I couldn't cope with that.
Fuck that. And then we were saying, we went to his grand's because we had lunch there on the weekend and we had all 3 kids and we're like, fuck, this is a lot. And then Jay's like, like they'd go to his grandparents and all the grandkids would sleep over. Oh, there's 14 of them.
Oof.
Crazy. So he was the 7th of 8 children. He had 4 older sisters and 2 older brothers and a younger sister named Carolyn. The family moved to Monmouth, Illinois, shortly after his birth. His father worked as a packer at Western Stoneware in Monmouth, having previously worked as a farmer and a logger, and his parents were described as religious teetotalers.
What does that mean?
Well, a teetotaler is a person who doesn't drink alcohol.
Oh.
So they never drank. I don't think either of them drank. They were religious and didn't drink at all.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like,
what's a teetotaler?
Teetotaler. And I've like spelt it out.
Teetotaler.
But I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. But yeah, when I saw it, I was like, oh, I could just put like don't drink alcohol. But I was like, no, let's teach the people.
Teach us the new word.
You learn something new every day.
The 40s.
Yeah. In 1947, when Richard was 6 years old, his father died from a heart attack.
Aww.
Benjamin, he was only 53.
Well, for the 40s, that's
That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
3 years later, on the 10th of May 1950, his mother Mary married Carl August Rudolph Lindbergh in Palo Pinto, Texas.
That's a lot of names.
That is way too many. There's 4 names.
I don't like it.
Mary and Carl had met during a train ride to Chicago. Imagine meeting someone on a train and then you get married. Well, 3 years later. I don't know. Could have been less. 3 years after the dad died, they got married. Carl at this time was a travelling insurance salesman with a 25-year criminal record that ranged from forgery to several DUIs.
Okay, less cute. Less cute.
He was also a hard drinker.
Oh, well, she was the teetotaler, so that's not going to work.
Yeah, like I don't know how you... Oh, I don't know. I feel like that's... You're either got 2 people that drink or like I don't drink and Jay does. But...
Neither Beck nor I drink or don't drink. Like,
yeah, it's just like occasions or
you know, sometimes Beck will have a glass of wine with dinner, but like I'm not interested. I'm a binge drinker, so like if I'm going out and I'm gonna drink,
you're gonna go hard or go home.
I go hard or go home. I will drink until Patricia comes to visit. Patricia is my drunk alter ego. Beck is standing in the hallway right now giving me evil eyes because she hates Patricia. Because Patricia is a wild bitch.
I just get really loud and think I'm hilarious.
I get all of the things. I also abscond. We were camping once when Patricia came to visit with all our friends, and I disappeared into the woods in my hoodie, and I was found a little while later just like staring up at the stars.
Just like Mr. Burns?
Yep.
I come in peace.
Yep.
No, I get really loud and think I'm funny. And when
I am funny.
I'm fucking hilarious. No, one of our friends, George, he's just like... Little George. You can just... I get all my anger out on him and I just bully the shit out of him.
Yeah.
But...
I do that to Beck.
He gives it back. So
well, Patricia does that to Beck.
Oh no, I do that to Jay all the time. So he was a drinker. His mother and Carl moved to rural Santo, Texas, but Richard and his younger sister Carolyn stayed with their aunt in Monmouth for a few more months to finish out the school year. In 1952, Richard's eldest brother Robert died in an automobile accident at the age of 23.
Oh, that's sad.
Yes, no, his dad's died. His oldest brother's now died. In 1951, after living in Santo for a year, the family moved to East Dallas. Over the next 12 years, the family moved frequently, living at 10 different addresses, usually in poor neighborhoods. When I was writing this, I worked out that since moving out of home at 21, I've lived in 7 different houses.
Wowzers.
That's a lot. I think I've lived in nearly more addresses between 21 and 28 than Mum has her whole life.
Wow.
Stability doesn't run in the family, apparently. Richard loathed his stepfather, who was often drunk, verbally abusive, and frequently absent. Richard ended up struggling a lot in school. He also refused to wear the glasses that he needed for reading.
Yep.
He ended up repeating the 8th grade, and by the 9th grade, he was failing every subject. Just after his 16th birthday in 1958, he ended up completely dropping out.
Wowzers.
At around 12 years old, Richard started drinking alcohol, and by 15, he was getting drunk almost every day.
Wow.
At 15, getting drunk every day. His first arrest in 1955 at age 13 for trespassing was followed by dozens of other arrests for misdemeanors over the next 8 years. From 1960 to 1963, Richard worked as a labourer for the 7-Up bottling company in Dallas.
Aww.
During this time, he met 15-year-old Shirley Annette Malone at the Texas State Fair.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
She was 15 at this time. Whenever they met, he would have been 19, turning 20.
Shit.
Shirley became pregnant after 3 weeks of dating, and they got married on the 19th of January 1962. So 20 and 15.
Wowzers.
During their marriage, Shirley reportedly lived in fear of him. She said that he would often rape her at knife point and demand sex 4 to 5 times a day.
Ew.
That's too much.
That's too many times.
4 or 5 times a day. The couple had a daughter on the 5th of July in 1962, while Richard was serving a 22-day jail sentence for disturbing the peace after a drunken melee in McKinney, Texas. I remember the first time I wrote that word, I said melee. It's spelled me-lee.
Me-lee.
In July 1963, at the age of 21, Richard was sentenced to serve 3 years in prison after being convicted of forgery and burglary. He was paroled in 1965 after serving 16 months at Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville, Texas. He was released from prison only a week before he was arrested again for attacking a woman in a parking lot of her apartment building wielding a 17-inch carving knife.
He sounds like a stand-up guy.
He's a piece of shit. It just escalates. Thankfully, the woman, I don't believe it was her, and she ran away screaming, which alerted people.
Yeah.
The people. Richard was convicted of aggravated assault, given a 16-month sentence to run concurrently with a parole violation sentence, and returned to prison in Huntsville. Due to an error, he was released in just 6 months. He was released just 6 months later upon the completion of his...
Due
to an error. They're like, oops,
put
the date in wrong. Was released just 6 months later upon the completion of his parole violations sentence on the 2nd of July 1965. After his release, Richard worked for 3 months as a driver for the Patterson Meat Company. Although he had 6 accidents in the company's truck, he was only fired after failing to show up for work.
Oh my God.
Harry, don't mind that you've crashed the fucking truck 6 times.
Yeah.
But not showing up.
That's a problem.
That's not okay. At some point in his 20s, he got the words "born to raise hell" on his arm.
Oh, of course.
And he fucking did. In December 1965, Richard moved in with a 29-year-old divorced woman who was a ex-professional wrestler and now a bartender at his favourite bar, Ginny's Lounge.
Ginny's.
Shortly after this, in January 1966, Shirley filed for divorce. That same month, Richard stabbed a man in a knife fight at Ginny's Lounge. He was charged with aggravated assault, but a defense attorney hired by his mother got the charge reduced to disturbing the peace, and he was fined $10.
$10.
But he was jailed for 3 days when he failed to pay the fine. Like, it's $10, man. Even back then, it would have been probably like $50 now or something.
Something like that, maybe.
His probation officer once said that when Speck is drinking, he will fight or threaten anybody as long as he has a knife or gun. When he's sober or unarmed, he couldn't face down a mouse.
Okay.
On the 5th of March 1966, Richard robbed a grocery store, stealing 70 cartons of cigarettes.
Shit.
Which he then sold out of the trunk of his car in the grocery store parking lot.
Okay.
You'd think he'd move like a little bit further away from where you just robbed.
You would hope so.
On the 8th of March, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Had he been apprehended under that warrant, it would have been his 42nd arrest in Dallas.
Oh, Jesus.
Just keep him in there. 42 arrests. Just fucking keep him.
Yeah.
But the next day, on the 9th of March, his sister Carolyn drove him to the Dallas bus depot, where he took a bus to Chicago, where his older sister Martha lived. Richard stayed with Martha and her family in Chicago for a few days and then returned to his hometown of Monmouth, where he initially stayed with some old family friends. At the time, his brother Howard was working as a carpenter in Monmouth and got Richard a job sanding plasterboard for another Monmouth carpenter.
Okay.
Soon after, Richard moved to the Christie Hotel in downtown Monmouth and spent most of his time in the downtown taverns. At the end of March, while Richard and some of his acquaintances were on a bar-hopping trip to Gulfport, they were detained overnight by police after Richard reportedly threatened a man in a tavern restroom with his knife.
Okay.
Bloody Richard.
He sounds great.
He's, yeah, top guy.
Yeah.
On the 3rd of April, 65-year-old Monmouth resident Mrs. Virgil Harris returned home at 1 a.m. to find a burglar in her home brandishing a knife. She described the burglar as I just keep thinking of the Hamburglar when I say that. The Hamburglar was in her house. Described the burglar as a 6-foot-tall white man who was very polite and spoke very softly with a southern drawl. Howdy, ma'am. I'm going to take your shit.
Yeah.
The man blindfolded her, tied her up, raped her, ransacked her house, and stole the $2.50 she had earned babysitting that evening.
Oh, darling.
Which would be about $24 now, but still. She earned that shit.
That shit.
That shit. Her monies. A week later, on April 9th, 32-year-old Mary Catherine Pierce was seen leaving her brother-in-law's tavern, Frank's Place, in downtown Monmouth, where she worked as a barmaid at around 12:20 a.m. She was reported missing on April 13th, and her body was found that day in an empty hog house behind the tavern. She had died from a blow to her abdomen that ruptured her liver.
Jesus.
Fucking hell.
Wild.
Richard had frequented Frank's Place, and the empty hog house was one of several he had helped to build in the preceding month. Monmouth police briefly questioned him about Mary Pierce's death when he showed up to collect his final carpentry paycheck on April 15th and asked him to stay in town for further questioning. On April 19th, police showed up at the Christie Hotel to continue questioning Richard, but they discovered that he had left the hotel a few hours earlier carrying his suitcase, saying he was just going to the laundromat. He had left town.
As you do.
Yeah, I'm just taking my whole suitcase to the washing machine. Don't mind me.
Yeah.
A search of his room turned up a radio and costume jewelry Mrs. Virgil Harris had reported missing from her house, as well as items reported missing in 2 other local burglaries in the previous month. So he's gone from stabbing people in a bar, and then he's burglarizing houses, and now he's escalated to murder.
Yeah.
Richard had returned to stay at his sister Martha's second-floor apartment. Richard told them that he had to leave Monmouth after refusing to sell narcotics for a crime syndicate there.
Wow.
Okay. Martha was a registered nurse in pediatrics before she was married, and her husband Jean worked nights as a railroad switchman. They also had 2 teenage daughters. Jean had served in the U.S. Navy and thought that the U.S. Merchant Marine might provide a suitable occupation for his unemployed brother-in-law. So on the 25th of April, he took Richard to the U.S. Coast Guard office to apply for a letter of authority to work as an apprentice seaman.
Seaman.
It comes up so a couple more times, I think. The application required being fingerprinted and photographed and having a physical examination by a doctor. Richard found work immediately after obtaining the letter of authority, joining the 33-member crew of Inland Steel's Clarence B. Randall, a L6-S-B1 class bulk or lake freighter.
Okay.
So that means anything to anyone that likes ships. During his first voyage on the ship, he got appendicitis and was evacuated by U.S. Coast Guard helicopter to St. Joseph's Hospital in Hancock, Michigan, where he had emergency surgery.
Yep.
Got the job, got on a boat, my appendix exploded.
Ouch.
After he was discharged from the hospital, Richard returned to stay with his sister Martha and her family in Chicago to recuperate. I remember when I was younger, I literally thought my appendix was bursting. I think I was like getting my period for the first time.
Oh, no. Oh, you poor darling.
I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. I'm going to explode. And I'm like, oh, that's what it feels like.
Still dying.
After about a month later, he rejoined the crew of the Clarence B. Randall, on which he served until June 14th, when he got drunk and quarrelled with one of the boat's officers and was put ashore on June 15th. So he's just like a bit of a mess.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Richard then travelled by train to Houghton, Michigan, to visit Judy Lacanium, It's got a long last name. A 28-year-old nurse's aide going through a divorce, whom he befriended at St. Joseph's Hospital. At the end of June, Judy gave him $80 to help him until he found work. He left to again stay with his sister Martha and her family in Chicago.
Yep.
I'd be like, for fuck's sake, buddy, get your shit together, get out of my house. On the 30th of June, Jean drove Richard to the National Maritime Union, or the NMU, hiring hall to file his paperwork for a seaman's card.
Seaman's card.
Oh, no. If you don't giggle at the word seaman, go away.
Seaman.
Leave now. The NMU hiring hall was 1 block east of 5 attached 2-story brick townhouses, 3 of which were occupied by South Chicago Community Hospital senior student nurses and Filipino exchange registered nurses. On Friday, the 8th of July, Jean drove him back to the NMU hiring hall to pick up his seaman's card and registered for a berth on the ship. Unfortunately, Richard lost out that day to a seaman with more seniority for a berth on the SS Flying Spray, a C-1-A cargo ship bound for South Vietnam, and returned to his sister's apartment for the weekend. By Monday, the 11th of July, Richard had outstayed his welcome with his sister. He packed his bag and again was driven by Jean to the NMU hiring hall to await a berth on a ship. He stayed the night in a rooming house and the next day returned to the NMU hiring hall. In mid-afternoon, he received an assignment on Sinclair's oil tanker, SS Sinclair Great Lakes, which was a 30-minute drive away in East Chicago, Indiana. Indiana? We're in Illinois.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think I fucked up that. When he had arrived there, he found that his spot had already been taken and he was driven back to the NMU hiring hall, which was now closed. He didn't have enough money for a rooming house that night, so he slept in an unfinished house. You'd feel bad for him, but also like you've stabbed multiple people by this time, you've burgled houses, you've killed a woman. On Wednesday, July 13th, Richard checked back into the NMU hiring hall. I think they just had to check in every day and be like, do you got anything?
Got any jobs?
He was angry for being sent to a non-existent assignment, and he had talked for 30 minutes in the car with Martha and her husband Jean, who had driven down to visit him. They parked on I'm assuming it might be East, parked on 100th Street next to Luella Elementary School. I was going to say elementary primary school. Across the street from the townhouses where the nurses lived. Richard said goodbye to Martha and Jean, and they gave him $25, and he then checked into the Shipyard Inn. He spent the rest of the day drinking in nearby taverns before he accosted 53-year-old Ella Mae Hooper at knife point. Ella had spent the day drinking at the same taverns as Richard. He took Ella into back to the Shipman Inn, raped her, and stole her black $16 mail order 22 caliber pistol. He then left dressed entirely in black, armed with a switchblade and Ella's handgun. Richard then returned to drink at the Shipyard Inn. I think I said Shipman. Fuck. The Shipyard Inn Tavern until 10:20 p.m. and walked about 1.5 miles west on East 100th Street to the nurse's townhouse. Is it clicking at all yet? Yes.
It is now.
At around 11 p.m. on the 13th of July 1966, Richard Speck broke into the 2319 East 100th Street townhouse in Chicago's Jeffrey Manor neighborhood. The townhouse was functioning as a dormitory for student nurses.
Yep.
It just goes really downhill from here, so...
Yeah.
I don't think any true crime cases, like maybe a handful, but they don't end very well. You haven't done something great if you end up on our podcast.
Yeah.
Judy Dykton decided to get some early morning studying done for a neurology exam. Being a warm July night, she had turned her fan... Oh, so fucking... Being a warm July night, she had her fan running. When she switched it off, she heard what sounded like an animal crying outside. Ignoring it, she decided to do some laundry. Judy went downstairs and turned on the washer, then headed back upstairs to study. Once more, she heard something. This time, she thought it sounded like a child crying out. She pulled open the blinds and saw a woman across the street at 2319 perched on a ledge. Judy pushed open the window and heard the woman crying, "Oh my God, they are all dead."
Ruh-roh.
Richard Speck had approached the townhouse and broke in through a window where he made his way to the bedrooms. He knocked first on the door of Filipina exchange student nurse, 23-year-old Corazon Amaru. At gunpoint, herded her and her fellow exchange students from the Philippines, 23-year-old Mileta Gargulo, and also 23-year-old Valentina Passion, into the next room where American students 20-year-old Patricia Matusek, 20-year-old Pamela Wilkening, and 24-year-old Nina Jo Schmale were sleeping. Cora, Mileta, and Valentina hid in a closet frightened when one of the women knocked on the closet door and assured her roommates the man would not harm them, and they came out. Richard pointed the gun at Nina and Patricia while holding Pamela around the waist. He switched off the light and made the women sit in a semicircle with their backs to the window. He told them, "I want some money. I'm going to New Orleans." They each asked permission to get their purses and gave him all their money. After a while, Gloria Davy came home from a date with her boyfriend. She staggered up the stairs somewhat drunk and opened the door to the bedroom. She screamed a low guttural scream when she saw Richard with a gun. Gloria was forced to join the circle. Richard got up, tore a sheet from one of the bunk beds and began cutting them up into strips. One by one, he tied each woman's hands and feet. Two other nurses, 20-year-old Mary Ann Jordan and 21-year-old Suzanne Farris, returned to the house from a chat session, opened the door to the back bedroom and found Richard hovering over a bound and gagged Pamela and her eyes were filled with terror. I don't think I put it in here. I couldn't find it again, but I'm pretty sure one of them spat at him.
Yeah.
Or she said something like, "I'm going to fucking identify you." But I couldn't find it again. Maybe I just made it up. They bolted down the hall right into the big bedroom and screamed when they saw all the other women tied up. They bolted down the hallway right into the... Nope, just read that. Richard, in hot pursuit behind them, pushed them into another bedroom. He stabbed and strangled the two women as they fought back. Then he washed up and returned to Pamela to finish her off with one stab to the heart. He then washed off again. So he's I don't know. There's multiple girls and he's washing off between each one of them. Sure, your fucking clothes and shit are going to be covered in blood.
Yeah, maybe he just didn't want to...
Get his hands dirty?
Yeah, maybe that.
Richard untied Nina's feet, led her down the hall to a bedroom, stabbed her in the neck and suffocated her with a pillow. Cora heard her scream and then the sound of water. Cora struggled even more to get her head under the bunk. Richard appeared and took Valentina, not bothering to untie her feet. He easily lifted the 100-pound woman and carried her to her death. How much is, again, didn't do conversions. Should have been 45 kilos.
Shit.
Tiny.
Very small.
Cora heard another scream, and again, water. He returned for Mileta, lifting her and carrying her off. Another 30 minutes passed, and water sounds. Before he took Pat Matusek, an athletic 155-pound woman, Cora heard him ask, "Are you the girl in the yellow dress?"
Can I have some more context, please?
I'd be like, "No, please let me go." He led Pat into the bathroom, punched her in the stomach, rupturing her liver, and then strangled her. So obviously the first girl he did that to as well. The one behind the tavern. Richard came back to the room, disrobed Gloria, who was asleep from the drinking she had done that evening, and raped her. As the bed springs squeaked and groaned, Cora watched, then closed her eyes and prayed. When she opened them again, they were gone. Cora decided to switch beds. She rolled and scooted her way across the bedroom floor, knowing that any moment he could come back in and drag her to her death. She made it under the bed and wedged herself in as tight as possible against the wall and waited. Richard possibly lost count or might have known 8 women lived in the townhouse, but was unaware that a 9th woman was spending the night. Cora stayed hidden under the bed until almost 6 a.m. and he broke in at 11 p.m. and started all this.
Wow.
And she just laid there and waited. And I think I was reading, she was like just laying there crying and praying. That'd be fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you'd just be waiting. You're like, well, he's got all the other ones. Like, I'm next. So, go back to Judy, the neighbor that found her crying. So when she got to Cora, she was shaking and crying, saying that they're all dead. Judy entered and opened the door of the townhouse and stepped into the living room. She found Gloria Davy nude, her hands tied behind her back, a strip of cloth knotted so tightly that a roll of her skin puffed over the cloth around her neck. Her head hanging from the couch, and her skin was a dusty blue. It's just horrible.
That's awful.
I just can't imagine walking into the scene and seeing all this.
Or even being Cora.
Yeah. Because to get out, she would have had to... Oh, no, actually, I think she jumped from the window. So she probably didn't have to see everyone, but
yeah,
still. Like,
she knew what was going on.
Yeah, and she would have just been in constant like, oh my God, I'm fucking next. I can hear all my friends dying. Whew. Judy fled to the townhouse of the house mother, Mrs. Bisson, yelling, "There's trouble in 19." The housemaker woke her other student nurses and ran from the house towards 2319 with Leona Bonzak trailing behind. Is 2319 the Monsters Inc. code?
Yeah. Go to 2319. 2319.
I don't know why she woke up the other students though. Like, wouldn't you be like, let's fucking hush hush? Like, we'll find out what's happening first.
Maybe.
Leona and Mrs. Bisson arrived on the scene. Leona touched Gloria Davy on the couch and said, "Davy," as if what she was seeing could not be true, and Gloria Davy would moan or stir to give some sign of life, but she didn't. Slowly, Leona mounted the stairs and looked down the hall. In the bathroom, she found a body. "Masuka," she said, but there was no answer. She crept into the other two bedrooms where she found the rest of the students drenched with so much blood that she was unable to recognize any of them except for Nina Schmale? A pillow covered most of her face, but she could see it was Nina. She was laying on her back, hands tied behind her, legs spread, a knife wound in her heart, a tight cloth around her neck.
That makes me so sad.
It's so fucked. Cold, numb, with the reality that 8 of her fellow students were dead, Leona walked downstairs where Mrs. Bisson was waiting. Why the fuck did she have to go in and not the bloody house mother chick?
Who fucking knows?
You go check, love. I'll stay here.
Yeah.
She told her not to go up there, that everyone was dead and there was nothing that could be done. Someone flagged down Officer Daniel Kelly, a young patrolman who had only been on the job for 18 months.
Oh, sweetheart.
And I think he was like early 20s. He radioed in that there was trouble and then entered the house. Inside, he was shocked to learn that he knew Gloria Davy. He had dated her sister.
Oh.
Upset, he drew his gun, searched the house, and found the other bodies. This part, this guy.
Okay.
Not that, like, he did nothing wrong, but, like, it's just a very weird situation. Like, I guess it was the 60s, but still. On July 13th, Joe Cummings, a WCFL radio police reporter, decided to roll on the city's southeast side. While driving back, he heard something on his zone radio. "Help, help, oh my God, I dated her sister, oh my God, I've never seen nothing like this. Oh, give me the sergeant, give me the lieutenant, oh God."
Oh.
Joe heard the dispatcher say, "Where are you? Where are you?" over and over again. Joe noticed that Kelly was... so Joe arrived at the scene after... So he's a police reporter. So like a...
Yeah.
Just a reporter, not a cop or anything. He arrived on the scene and noticed Kelly was going in circles. His cap was on backwards. His shirt tail hung over his pants. His face red. And his eyes were darting all over the place.
Oh, he was shook.
He was like, fuck, like 18 months on the job. This
He
poor
was
kid.
in shock.
He said, "I'm Joe Cummings, WCFL police reporter. What's happening? I'm not a policeman. I'm a police reporter. What do you got here?" he asked. Kelly said, "It's a homicide." "I'm going in. I won't touch nothing," Joe said. Like,
Yep.
Don't worry about securing the crime scene.
No, I'm going in, guys.
I'm going in. I won't touch nothing.
Yeah. See you, fellas.
Joe opened the door, stepped inside, and saw the body of a white female that was murdered. He went back out and walked up to the cop again and said, "Say, you've got a homicide in the living room."
No shit. He did just say it's a homicide.
"Say, you've got a homicide."
Fucking hell, mate.
At that moment, Joe couldn't understand why the cop appeared agitated with a routine murder. But just a routine murder.
Just a routine murder.
Callie said, "Go upstairs." He went up to the second floor, looked down the hallway, and turned right. It was still dark, and the sun was beginning to rise. He walked down the hall. To his right, he saw bodies inside the bedrooms. A little further down the hall, he saw another bedroom with 3 more bodies. He turned to go down the stairs and passed a bathroom and found another body inside. That made 7 upstairs and 1 downstairs.
Yeah, babe.
He's
That's
like,
why.
oh.
Oh, so it's not just a routine
Just
murder.
a routine homicide. That's fucking cringe. He saw a bloody handprint on the bedroom door.
On the bedroom door.
He leaned close and could see fingerprints.
Oh.
The cops fanned out and hit the streets around the area. They figured only someone who knew the area could be involved since the nurse's residence was not highly visible. Acting Lieutenant Victor Verdolayak, Sergeant Mike Clancy, and Edward Wiloskinski,
Yeah.
John Mitchell, and Edward Boyd formed another of the teams for the manhunt. Cora had given a description of the killer: 6 feet tall, blonde hair, 160 pounds, with a southern drawl.
Southern drawl.
Wiloskinski spoke. It's hard. So many letters.
Speaking's hard.
That guy spoke to an attendant at the gas station nearby. He remembered hearing about a guy from one of the managers that he left his bags at the station 2 days before, complaining about missing a ship and losing out on a job.
Ringing some bells.
The team also checked out the Merchant Marine Union Hall on 100th Street, walking distance from the townhouse. A bell struck when the agent remembered an irate seaman who lost out on a double booking, 2 guys sent for one job, a common practice dealing with the alcohol-aided seamen. Dumping the wastebasket, he fished out a crumpled assignment sheet. He remembered the guy had a southern accent. In fact, he could barely understand him.
Oh.
The assignment sheet that he pulled out of the wastebasket read the name Richard B. Speck.
Yeah.
During this time, Richard had gone to Pete's Tap around 10:30 a.m. From his belt hung a 12-inch hunting knife.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the same knife he just used to murder 8 student nurses. He got another one.
Just several hunting knives.
He was like, "Hey, Catherine Knight, can I borrow your knives?"
Yeah. Wonder if he hung him above his bed too.
Oh, all weirdos. A month earlier, Richard had pawned his 25 jewel watch for some booze. Now with a few bucks on him, he brought the watch back from Ray Crawford, the bartender. Which is like, you have the money now because you fucking took all the nurses' money.
Yeah.
Then he asked Ray to put the hunting knife behind the bar and told him about his time in Vietnam and how he used that knife to kill several people there.
Yep.
Okay, Richard. Richard at one point reached behind the bar, got the knife, then snuck behind the bartender, put his left arm around his chest and held the knife to his throat.
Aww.
He told... Aw.
Aww.
Cute. He told Crawford this was the way he'd kill someone if he had to. Once Ray was pissed off, Richard let go and claimed it was all just a big joke.
Yeah.
So funny.
I joke about that shit all the time.
William Kirkland, a regular at the bar, brought the knife from Richard. He's like, "Hey, you're selling your knife, buddy?"
I'll buy it.
He told Kirkland that he purchased the knife from a vet aboard ship. In reality, the knife was given to him by his brother-in-law, Gene.
Oh, yeah?
Richard and William then went across the street to another bar, the Soco Grand, and continued to drink together. It was there that Richard, for the first time, heard that there was a survivor from the massacre.
Wowzers.
Turning to Kirkland, he said, "It must have been some dirty motherfucker that done that."
Yeah, you.
Yeah, you fucking worm. He hooked up with another drinking buddy, Robert Red Gerald.
Yep.
Good old Red. From bar to bar, they drank until Red, wrecked from too much booze, needed to crash. Richard took him back to his room at the Shipyard Inn so he could sleep it off. Before he let Red sleep, he told him about about shacking up the night before with a hooker who thought he was so good he got it for free.
Wow. Sure.
Oh my god, your best sex in my life. I'll just give it. Don't worry about paying me.
Oh my God.
Mm.
How up yourself can you be?
Yeah, what a fucking wanker. He left Red, went downstairs to the bar, and belted down a few more until he was pulled away for a telephone call. At this time, police officer Edward Willosinski, we'll go with that, had the agent from the Merchant Marine Union Hall call Speck's last known telephone number, which was the phone number to his sister Martha's house.
Oh.
The agent told Jean that Richard was needed to ship out. The Union Hall had found him a job. Jean told the agent he would try to find him, happy to know that his low-life brother-in-law would be out of his hair. Jean called the shipyard. I don't know why I keep saying shipman. Called the Shipyard Inn, where he found Richard. He told Richard to call the Union Hall because they had a job for him. He called the Union Hall and the agent told him to come down for his assignment on the ship Sinclair Great Lakes. But Richard knew that the Sinclair had shipped out a few days ago.
Uh-oh.
He told the agent that he was up north and it would take about an hour to get there, but he'd be down to pick up the assignment. But he never showed up. He's like, try and trick me, motherfuckers.
Yep, he knew. He knew.
Immediately, Richard went upstairs, woke Red, packed his bags, and went downstairs and ordered a cab.
Yep.
Richard waited inside the Shipyard Inn bar and began to play pool by himself when 3 plainclothes cops came in looking for a tall, blonde guy with a southern accent. Richard played it cool. He listened and continued to play pool just 10 feet from the officers. When the cabbie came in and yelled, Richard slugged his drink down, wiped his mouth, and slipped out the side door. He plied his belongings and Red into the taxi and told the cabbie to go north. Before heading north, he told the cabbie to drop off Red. He told Red he had a job on the Sinclair starting at 7 a.m. the next morning. The cabbie drove north, asking his customer about the address. Richard, clueless about his whereabouts, pointed to a building, Cabrini Green, in the projects. Speck made sure he watched the cabbie drive off. He then headed down to the Rayleigh Hotel, where he rented a room from the manager, Othea Hullinger, under the name of John Staten. I'm surprised he wasn't just like John Smith.
John Smith. Don't beat it, beat it. Don't beat it, beat it.
At the Rayleigh, Algie Lemhart, a clerk, remembered a drunken Speck coming in with, quote, a coloured girl. He watched the couple and before the elevator closed, he heard the girl call him Richard. A half hour later, the girl came running down and told the clerk that Richard had a gun. In the morning, Algie told Mrs. Hullinger about the man with the gun, and from the description, she figured it was John Staten. Suspicious, she called the police to sort it out. 2 officers. 2 officers showed up at 8:30 a.m. and Richard, who was still groggy from the night before, woke up to 2 cops standing over him.
Wow.
He lay fully clothed on his bed with a gun sticking out from the pillow. The cops asked him why he had a gun and denied it was his and told him that it belonged to the hooker. When he asked what his name was, he told them Richard Speck. The police checked his wallet and found his seaman's ID and passport. Unfortunately, at the time, not all the police were alerted to the identity of the nurse's killer. For 15 minutes, Richard was questioned and then the officers confiscated the gun and left. Thank God there's like systems that boo to everyone.
Yeah.
But fuck, he would have been like, oh my God, this is it. I'm done for. They found me. And then it's like, we're taking your gun. Goodbye.
Yep, that's it. That's all. Goodbye.
Have a good day. By July 19th, 1966, Homicide Commander Flanagan received a call on his car radio From Lieutenant Emil Geisy, the police department's fingerprint expert, that Richard Speck's fingerprints were a match from the prints taken from the townhouse. An arrest warrant was written up, and now the manhunt for Richard Speck went into full force. State Attorney Ward was concerned about the press. He didn't want anything jeopardizing the case. He called Police Chief Wilson to give him the guidelines, but it was too late. The chief was giving a press conference while Ward was on the phone.
Righto.
Good job, guys. An all-points bulletin was now out for Richard Speck, and now the public would know the identity of the murderer.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like Richard Ramirez. Like, the public helped catch him.
Yeah.
That was, I think it's one of the best, like, how they catch someone ever.
It was wild.
Imagine being in the street. You'd be like, who is it? This guy's running.
Yeah.
Beat the shit out of him. You would, though.
Yeah, I would.
During this time, Richard had become acquainted with two other men, Claude One Eye Lunsford
What a name.
and Shorty Ingram.
On your shorty.
Shorty and One Eye. They were passing a bottle back and forth outside a resale shop. Never one to pass up a drink, he hung around fascinated with One Eye, a hobo who had recently come up from Dallas on a freight train. Good old One Eye. Richard found out that the pair were staying at the Star Hotel, which was 85 cents a night.
Shit.
That's, well, yeah, it's probably be less than $10 a night still, but it was like a shithole. Like, you got like, it was a concrete floor, maybe a window, no window, and then like a cot, like a
just like a flat bed thing.
Yeah, it just 85 cents a night. What could you?
Yeah.
Can't expect much. So he went back to the Rayleigh and packed his bags. Mrs. Hullinger and Algie spotted him leaving. As he walked out the door, he said, "I'm just going to do the laundry."
Yep, as you do.
And never returned. Exactly 15 minutes after Richard left, two detectives came in and showed a photo of him to the clerks. Mrs. Hullinger stared at the photo and her eyes widened. It's him. It's Richard. He just left.
Wowzers.
Like, go find him. The next day, Richard sold some of his belongings on Skid Row. Ready for another drunken binge, he picked up a pint of wine at the local liquor store and saw several newspapers with his name and photo splashed across them.
Rut-row.
It's like in the Simpsons movie.
Yeah. oh my God, there they are.
Yeah. Oh, The Simpsons. I hope we inspire some people to go watch The Simpsons if they haven't already. It's a great fucking TV show.
All of it. It's just all great.
Oh, we finished House finally.
Oh, finally.
Finally, we have started watching Once Upon a Time.
Oh, okay.
So,
we're still on SVU.
But I cried on the last episode of House. But it was like the last few seasons, well, total sidetrack, the last few seasons, they kind of fuck you around. You're like, it could be this or it could be this.
Yeah.
And then the last season, spoiler alert, it's, I'm like, it's so many years old, you should have seen it already. You've probably seen it already. But like, House dies in a massive fire. And I'm like, they're at his funeral. And me and Jay are like, is he dead?
Is he really dead?
He really dead?
Who knows?
Go watch it and find out. It's on Netflix. Australian Netflix. Anyway.
Aussie Netflix.
Whoop, whoop. I don't know why I thought of that.
Simpsons.
Squirrel
brain. Off we go.
He went back to the Star Hotel, sucked down the wine, slipped into the bathroom down the hall, smashed the bottle, and cut his wrists and inner elbows.
Ugh. Of course he did.
Yeah, he's like, oh my God, I'm on the newspaper. Better take the easy route. One Eye, doing the rounds after work, caught a glimpse of the newspapers with Richard's picture on them. He went back to the Star and found himself in the midst of Richard's suicide attempt. One Eye left and made an anonymous call to the police department saying that the man they are looking for is at the Star Hotel, but the police did not dispatch a car.
What? Why?
I don't know. It's just like one of those cases with there's so many little fuck ups. Like the cops not knowing, like the alert not being spread out far enough where he could have got caught. And now they're like, oh, probably just a hoax.
Yeah.
Around midnight, the hotel's desk clerk called in the emergency and Richard was rushed to the Cook County Hospital, the same hospital that held the bodies of the nurses. Inside the emergency room, 25-year-old Leroy Smith, a first-year resident, examined Richard's wounds. Leroy?
Yep.
He's great. I don't know what else to say. He, like being a first-year resident, he probably knew some of the nurses.
Yeah.
He noticed something familiar about him. He checked his arm and used his own saliva to wash off the blood, looking for a tattoo. It was there as he suspected, born to raise hell.
Yuck.
He was probably just like licked his fingers and then wiped
Licked
it.
his fucking
He didn't like
finger.
lick his arm. Leroy asked a nurse to go get the newspaper he left in another room. He then compared the photo on it to Richard.
Yep.
Richard pleaded with the doctor for some water when Leroy grabbed him by the back of his neck, squeezing it with all his might, and asked him, "Did you give water to the nurses?"
Oh, love that.
He dropped his head back on the gurney and called in a policeman who was guarding another patient down the hall. Leroy told him that he had Richard Speck, the suspect in the murder of the 8 nurses. Because, yeah, like...
Yeah.
Well, I think they were all in their final year. So they'd been there for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And like a lot of people know them. They were, well, their bodies were at this
They all would
hospital.
have known them.
Yeah. Felony court judge Herbert J. Pashton appointed an impartial panel to report on Richard's competence to stand trial and his sanity at the time of the crime. A panel of 3 physicians suggested by the defense and 3 physicians selected by the prosecution, consisting of 5 psychiatrists, 5 psychiatrists and 1 surgeon, general surgeon. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
The panel's confidential report deemed Richard competent to stand trial and concluded that he had not been insane at the time of the murders. While awaiting trial, Richard participated in twice-weekly sessions with part-time Cook County Jail psychiatrist Dr. Marvin Zipperin. Dr. Zipperin prepared a discharge summary with depression, anxiety, guilt, and shame... with depression, anxiety, guilt, and shame among Richard's emotions, but also a deep love for his family.
Okay.
It went on to note an obsessive compulsive personality and a Madonna prostitute attitude towards women, and that he viewed women as saintly until he felt betrayed by them for some reason, after which hostility developed. And I reckon because the sister was a nurse and she told him to get the fuck out of her house pretty much.
Yeah.
And then the chick that he was living with was a nurse.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But Dr. Zipperin did not testify for the defense or the prosecution, as both sides were troubled to learn before the trial that he was writing a book about Richard Speck for financial gain. Richard later claimed that he had no recollection of the murders, but he had confessed the crime to Dr. Leroy Smith at the Cook County Hospital. Leroy did not testify because the confession was made while Richard was sedated. Illinois Supreme Court Justice John J. Stamos, not the same John Stamos, not Uncle Jesse, who knew of the hospital confession, stated, quote, "We don't need it. We have an eyewitness." And then he mic dropped and walked out.
Yeah.
Richard, who was still recuperating in the hospital after his suicide attempt, was unaware that Assistant State Attorney William Martin had arranged for Cora to identify him.
Wow.
Dressed in nurse's attire, she went on rounds with another nurse, eventually arriving at his room. For a full 3.5 minutes, she observed the man she saw that night. Her friends were brutally murdered. Leaving the room, she met William Martin and several detectives and said, "It's really him." And then she collapsed into an emotional heap.
Aww.
The evidence was starting to make their case stronger. With the fingerprint match, Richard unable to tell his whereabouts during the murders, Cora's identification, witnesses that put him in the area, the knife recovered from a river, t-shirts
T-shirts.
T-shirts worn by him left at the crime scene, and sperm identified as Richard's. It's like, really? There's so much piling against you, sir. Of the 609 people questioned for jury duty, 50 made it through. On March 30th, 1967, 12 men and women were chosen. The jury selection was a long and tedious process, taking 6 weeks of questioning. In court, Richard was again positively identified by the solo surviving student nurse, Cora. This bitch is a fucking badass.
Sounds like it.
When Cora was asked if she could identify the killer of her fellow students, she rose from her seat in the witness box, walked directly in front of Richard Speck, and pointed her finger at him, nearly touching him, and said, "This is the man."
Wowzers.
Imagine having the balls to fucking go up right in his face.
She had balls.
She was like, "Fuck you. I'm getting justice for my friends. You don't scare me. You're going to jail, little man."
Bitch.
On the 15th of April, after 49 minutes of deliberation, the jury found Richard guilty and recommended the death penalty.
Yeah.
Bye. On June 5th, Judge Herbert Pashton sentenced Richard to die in the electric chair. It's going to sound like a bug zapper. On the 28th of July, 1971, the US Supreme Court upheld Richard's conviction but reversed his death sentence because more than 250 potential jurors were unconstitutionally excluded from his jury because of their conscientious or religious beliefs against capital punishment.
Oh, of course.
Instead of the death penalty, on the 21st of November 1972, Judge Richard Fitzgerald resentenced Richard to from 400 to 1,200 years imprisonment.
Yeah, why not?
8 consecutive sentences of 50 to 150 years.
Nice.
Fuck you, boy.
Fuck you, boy.
While incarcerated at the Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill, Illinois, Speck was given the name Birdman after the film Birdman of Alcatraz because he kept a pair of sparrows that flew into his cell.
Anya.
He was described as a loner who kept a stamp collection and enjoyed listening to music. A stamp collection.
How can you keep a stamp collection in prison?
What's the 60s?
True.
70s?
The 70s of it all.
They probably would have stamped letters.
Yeah, but like that's not what stamp collecting is. They keep like mint stamps, no?
Oh, maybe he just kept, I don't know.
Maybe he just bought stamps to keep them.
He seems like a loser that would do that.
Yeah.
His contacts with the warden included requests for new shirts, a radio, and other mundane items. The warden merely described him as a big nothing doing time.
Nice.
Richard was not a model prisoner. He was often caught with drugs or distilled moonshine.
Yes.
Better toilet. No, what is it? Toilet wine? Prison wine?
Yeah.
Sure. Punishment for such
brew?
moonshine.
Moonshine?
Jay's friend made moonshine once and we did beer pong with it and it landed in, we only had one that had the moonshine in it. It smelt like it would be a cleaning chemical.
Yeah.
And Jay, as soon as it went down, it came, like his
Straight
body
back
just
up.
rejected it. Punishment for such infractions never stopped him. He'd say, "How am I going to get in trouble? I'm in here for 1,200 years."
True. I mean, you're already going to be there forever. What does it matter?
Yeah. Add years, whatever.
Yeah.
Make it 2,000 years.
Go on.
Richard loathed reporters, but granted only one press interview in 1978 to Chicago Tribune columnist Bob Greene. During that interview, he publicly confessed to the murders for the first time and said he thought he would get out of prison between now and the year 2000.
Oh, darling.
At which time he hoped to run his own grocery store.
Yeah.
Okay. You're in there for 1,000 years, buddy.
Yep.
Richard stated that at the time of the killings, quote, "I had no feelings at all that night. They said there was blood all over the place. I can't remember. It felt like nothing. I'm sorry as hell. For those girls and for their families and for me. If I had to do it over again, it would just be a simple house burglary.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sir.
So I'd still fucking traumatize the women by going in
Yeah.
and burglarizing them, but that's
Wouldn't
okay.
kill them this time. He's such a fucking loser.
Wowzers.
In his book Mindhunter, inside the FBI's elite serial crime unit, John E. Douglas of the FBI's behavioral science unit refers to a telling prison incident Richard revealed to him in an interview. Richard. He found an injured sparrow that had flown in through one of the broken windows and nursed it back to health.
Let him out.
No.
Let him out of prison.
That's fucking... Well, it's not funny, but it is. When it was healthy enough to stand, he tied a string around its leg and had it perched on his shoulder. At one point, a guard told him pets weren't allowed. Oh no. I can't have it, Speck challenged. He then... I don't know why it's scared. He then walked over to a spinning fan and threw the small bird in.
Oh.
Just imagine feathers everywhere.
Can you imagine being so psychotic that you nursed a bird back to health, and then when someone says, you can't have pets, right? He's like, oh. Poof.
I'm going to throw it into a fan. It's just funny to picture it as if it was a cartoon.
Yeah.
And
Not in real life, though.
Oh, fuck, am I crying? And just feathers going everywhere. But that poor bird. So he threw the bird into the fan. Horrified, the guard said, I thought you liked that bird. I did, replied Speck, but if I can't have it, no one can.
Oh, my God.
He's just so fucked up. Oh, my God, that poor bird. The poor everyone. Richard Speck's just an asshole.
Oh, Richard Speck.
Oh, that's nearly as good as, Richard Chase. Maybe it's just a Richard thing.
It must be.
Now, we'll touch on the prison video. Have you seen this prison video of Richard Speck?
No.
Well, Chicago television news anchor Bill Curtis received videotapes made at Stateville Correctional Center in 1988 from an anonymous attorney. Showing them publicly for the first time before the Illinois state legislature, Bill Curtis pointed out the explicit scenes of sex, drug use, and money being passed around by prisoners who seemingly had no fear of being caught. In the center was Richard Speck performing oral sex on another inmate, sharing a large quantity of cocaine with another inmate, parading in silk panties, and sporting gynecomastia, which is allegedly grown using smuggled hormone treatments.
Oh.
So he had titties.
Oh.
In the video, you can see him sitting on his chair, and he's got some titties.
Okay.
And boasting, quote, if they only knew how much fun I was having, they'd turn me loose. From behind the camera, a prisoner asked Richard if he had killed the nurses. He responded, sure I did. When asked why, he shrugged and jokingly said, it just wasn't their night.
Okay.
He's such a dick. In early December, Richard was transported from Stateville Correctional Center to Silver Cross Hospital in Joliet, Illinois, after complaining of severe chest pain. In the early morning of December 5th, 1991, Richard died of what was believed to be a heart attack, one day shy of what would have been his 50th birthday.
Oh,
So he did.
So sad.
Rest in not peace, you.
Rest in distress.
Yeah, with your titties. So I'd done this whole script, and then I found an article from it was a 2016 article on the Chicago Tribune, and it was titled A Rare Glimpse into 8 Lives Lost by Rosemary Regina Sobel.
Uh-huh.
And she had spoken to, I think, the family members of each of the 8 girls. And so we'll just go through them so you can learn a little bit about the 8 girls. Girls, they're in their 20s, but still, killed before their life started.
Yeah.
Like they were all about to finish nursing school.
Yeah, they hadn't even finished school yet. They hadn't even gotten to do all of the wonderful things in the world that they would
Some
have
of
done
them were
as nurses.
20, so like they haven't even been able to go out and like party
Yeah.
like properly, legally. Nina Jo Schmale? I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Nina was 19 when she announced to her family, "I'm going to nursing school." In the early 1960s, when it wasn't assumed that women would leave the house to work, and those who did had few choices: teacher, secretary, stewardess, or nurse. It took Nina a while to choose nursing. After graduating from Glenbard Township High School in Glen Allen in 1959, she worked as a secretary but didn't like it. She did, however, like her volunteer job at an elderly care facility known as the Poor Farm, and she made friends with her patients. She even brought them Christmas presents. Her experience there sparked her interest in nursing. So did the fact that her brother John, who was 4 years older, was studying to be a doctor.
Aww.
John and Nina grew up on an acre of land near suburban Wheaton. Years later, when Nina moved into the townhouse where she died, she installed an old Schmale Road sign in her bedroom. Growing up, Nina was a good student, well-liked, quiet but with a sense of humour. She loved Elvis, cats and the colour pink. I feel like everyone still loves Elvis, but like
obviously.
peak Elvis. By the time Nina entered nursing school, she was 3 or 4 years older than most of the classmates. 3 or 4 years older than most of her classmates, and was worried she was over the hill. But she came with a car. Not just any car. A 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air convertible in a pale yellow colonial cream.
Oh.
It was a gift from her father, who could barely afford it and who himself drove in a run-down pickup truck.
Oh.
In one of the photos her brother John found in his basement was of a young man crouching next to the Bel Air, washing the white walls, smiling for the camera. He was the man Nina planned to marry, but only after graduation.
Aww.
There were so many of them that had like partners and fiancés, and they were planning their weddings.
Plans for life.
Marriage was prohibited for student nurses. So was pregnancy. Jewelry, makeup, and nail polish were forbidden on duty. Nursing school, as one former student described it, was like a cross between a convent and a boot camp. During the first 2 years, all the nursing students were required to live in dorms attached to the hospital, but in their third and final year, in the hot Chicago summer of 1965, Nina and 5 others moved into one of the 3 townhouses the hospital rented on East 100th Street. It was small and nothing fancy, 1 bathroom and 3 bedrooms upstairs. Some bunk beds, some singles. The first floor consisted of a living room, a powder room, and a kitchen. The close quarters helped turn most of the women into close friends. The kitchen was the townhouse social hub, a place where Nina and her roommates congregated to eat, study, and listen to the record player from the nearby living room. When John Schmale talked about what happened that night, he uses the word anger, rage, mourning, and also waste.
Yep.
What a waste that Nina and her friends weren't able to give the world everything they had to give or enjoy its pleasures. He wonders what it would have been like to grow old with his sister. What Nina, who died at 24, would look like today at 74.
Oh.
He hates knowing that anyone who Googles the name Nina Schmale lands on the name Richard Speck. That's why he and his wife established the Nina Joe Schmale Scholarship Fund at Wheaton College. Nina's name and hers alone is now attached to something good. So sad. So it was 1 of 8. So we have Mary Ann Jordan. So Mary Ann Jordan grew up hearing her father's tales of her Irish grandmother Grace. In the early 1900s, Grace Jordan was a high-ranking surgical nurse at the University of Michigan, and the stories of her accomplishments made Mary Ann think she could be a nurse too. Grace Jordan wasn't the only family member to stir Mary Ann's interest in nursing. There was also Billy. Mary Ann was the 4th of 6 kids to Philip and Mary Jordan. Billy was the youngest, born with Down syndrome. From early childhood, she connected with him in a unique way, and she was why and he was why she wanted to specialize in pediatric nursing. Her sister recalls that she was great with him, always very playful and very compassionate. Billy loved her tremendously. If you asked Marianne where she was from, she'd give a classic southern side answer, naming not her neighborhood, but her parish, Our Lady of Peace. She loved swimming, ice skating, and softball. She played basketball in the alley, badminton across the back fences, and roller skated in the basement of the family's 3-bedroom bungalow. It was the kind of childhood that half a century later people look back on and call simpler, innocent, and a time where city kids were raised to be independent and unafraid. But life wasn't all play. Marianne had family responsibilities. At age 10, she walked with her sister Susan to her first day of kindergarten. When her father was at work and her mother was trying to take care of the house and Billy, she took Susan along while she ran family errands on 79th Street where the shopkeepers knew her name. During the summers, she accompanied Billy to the nearby Rainbow Beach, splashed him with the water, hugged him, made him laugh, a boisterous laugh he copied from her. Oh, no.
That's so sad.
An impressive and brazen mimic, Mary Ann made everyone laugh around her. Her sister said she had a wicked sense of Irish humour.
Oh.
A very fucking dry humour, that one.
Yeah.
Mary Ann brought her Irish humour, her sense of duty, and her talent for friendship to nursing school and the townhouse at East 100th Street. By July of 1966, however, Mary Ann, 20, had moved out of the townhouse and back into her family bungalow. She was at home on the night of July 13th when her brother Phil stopped by. Phil was engaged to one of Mary Ann's classmates, Suzanne Farris, who still lived in the townhouse, and Suzanne was with him that evening. Come and spend the night at the townhouse, Suzanne suggested to Mary Ann. They could talk about the wedding, and so shortly after 12:15, Mary Ann and Suzanne climbed the stairs to Suzanne's bedroom. So they were the two that came in last. Yeah. So we have Suzanne Farris. John Farris carries a photo of his sister Susie in his wallet. It's a typical 1950 school photograph, small, black and white, cropped with pinking shears, showing Susie at about 10 wearing what looks like a brownie uniform. He keeps the photo in a plastic pouch tucked next to the prayer card from her funeral. The Farris family lived in a quiet, tree-lined, far south side neighborhood called Fair Elms. Their father, John, had attended seminary, changed his mind about the priesthood, and married a young woman, Mary, who had grown up 3 blocks from him. That's so cute.
Mm-hmm.
In the family's 2-bedroom Cape Cod home, Susie and her older sister Marilyn shared a bedroom, and John had his own. Their parents slept on a hide-a-bed in the living room. When Farris thinks about growing up with Susie, he thinks about the kitchen in that one small room with its linoleum?
No, linoleum. The lino.
Yeah.
The lino floor.
Lino floor. An overhead light. Susie taught him how to make a grilled cheese sandwich and how, if you mix sour cream and dry onion soup mix, presto, you had French onion dip. There you go. If you didn't know that one.
I didn't.
Well, now you can make French onion dip. The kitchen is where he and Susie shared lunch, usually made by their dad, who worked afternoons while their mother worked days. It's where Susie taught him, as a 10-year-old boy, to play solitaire.
Oh.
The kitchen was also home to the family cookie jar, a white canister that said Cookie on the front, a detail he retains because Cookie was his father's nickname for Susie.
Oh.
He remembers that after she died, when the mourners came, their father wept and moaned, Cookie, Cookie, Cookie. That'd be so fucking hard. Susie was the kind of girl people might call pretty, perky, popular. She liked clothes, and since the family didn't have a lot of money, she made her own.
Oh.
An average student at Aquinas High School, she was turned down by Loyola University. So after graduation, she took a job as a file clerk for People's Gas. With her salary, she paid tuition for college night classes downtown, after which she commuted home to 111th Street. Eventually, she enrolled in nursing school and thought it wasn't a field she had dreamed of as a girl. She had a knack. She displayed uncommon ease with the dying and never balked at the mess that came with tending to human bodies. The last time John Farris saw Susie, He had just come home from a track meet carrying his victory medals, and she was visiting with her boyfriend Phil. John Ferris liked his sister's boyfriend. Phil taught public school, had a sailboat, and was nice to him and his kid brother. Phil was also the brother of Susie's classmate Mary Ann Jordan, who lived in the townhouse for a while but then moved back home. They were the last women to arrive at the townhouse that night. Now we have Gloria Jean Davy. On August 7th, 1966, when Laurie Davy, 11... Oh, God, I didn't realise she was 11 when I wrote this. Oh, that's so fucking sad now. When Laurie Davy, 11, walked across the stage to accept her sister's diploma. Everywhere she looked, she saw starch white uniforms, starch white caps, the meticulously dressed 1966 graduating class of South Chicago Community Hospital School of Nursing. A camera caught the moment a pretty girl in a plaid dress with a Peter Pan collar reaching with white gloves for the document her sister had worked so hard to earn. What the camera couldn't catch were the girl's thoughts, the confusion she felt at the spectacle of all these other graduates. Why were they here and her sister wasn't? Gloria Davy was the second of 6 siblings, born in the same hospital where she eventually studied. There's just way too many children. Where she eventually studied nursing, raised not far from the townhouse where she died. Her father, Charles, was a former Marine who expected as much from his 5 daughters as he did from his son. In Laurie's words, Gloria was driven, independent, intelligent, headstrong, poised, creative, and snippy when she didn't like what you were doing. She started college as an English major at Northern Illinois University, then switched to nursing. In 1965, she became president of the Student Nurses Association of Illinois. The townhouse Gloria shared with other student nurses was often a mess. So she sometimes paid her little sister $1 or $2 to clean. Laurie would ride her bike over, do the dishes, pick up the clothes scattered around the living room. Being in the world of the older girls felt cool. One summer night in 1966, when her father, who worked for a steel company, was in Pittsburgh on business, Laurie and her 2 younger sisters crowded into their parents' bed. They were excited. Not only had they been allowed a slumber party with their mother, but their big sister, who was about to graduate from nursing home, was coming home for good the next day. Oh, I know.
I don't like it.
As they snuggled, the phone rang in the nearby den. It was Gloria, who was only 22, calling from the townhouse saying her fiancé had just dropped her off. "I'm in," said Gloria, who phoned her mother every night to say she was back and safe. "I'm home." Oh. The next time Laurie heard the phone ring, it was morning. Her dad was on the line. He turned on the TV news in Pennsylvania. Not long afterwards, Arlene Davy sat on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest, and made the announcement to her daughters. Gloria's been murdered. Laurie remembers her saying, "A lot of people will be here shortly. Girls, we need to clean the house."
Oh.
That's such a quick clean. People are coming.
Yep.
Before long, the Davy home was packed with people, and every room, it seemed like, was packed with roses. So many roses, the scent made Laurie sick. At her father's urging, Laurie considered becoming a nurse, but she finally told him that she couldn't. She was just too emotional for the job. After she married and had 3 kids, she told her kids that Auntie Gloria had died in a car crash.
Oh.
She continued the ruse until the day her daughter, then in high school, was watching a TV show about Richard Speck,
Oh.
the women he murdered and the families left behind. Her daughter asked, "Did I just see Grandpa on the television?" Could you imagine?
Oh no.
Why is Grandpa in this murder documentary?
Yeah. Why is Grandpa there?
Yeah. Laurie realised it was time to tell them the truth. In the Davy family, according to Laurie, grieving openly for Gloria was considered weakness, especially by their father, a military man. I couldn't imagine. It was like the Soul Murders guy. And the daughter was doing a project on like...
Oh, yeah. When she found out that her dad was the killer.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God, could you imagine? It was just that line. It was just like funny the way that it was quoted. Why is Grandpa on the television?
Yeah, why is he on the television?
So we have Patricia Ann Matusek. Often after a day of classes at Ben-Gur High School, Pat walked to Roslyn Community Hospital to see her cousin Tommy. She was 14, he was 15, and he was dying. She'd bring him water, fluff his pillow, hold his hand, and tell him that she loved him. On many of those days, she walked home crying. Yet it was her afternoons with Tommy that made her think that she could be a nurse. Pat lived above Joe Matusek's club, the tavern her father ran, in the 10800 block of South Michigan Avenue. Next door was a funeral home run by Arlene Baskey's dad. But some of them are shorter names, but they're just hard. Between their second floor apartments stretched a low, flat roof, and Pat and Arlene often ran across it to tap on each other's windows.
That's so sweet.
By the time Pat was 5, she had a third best friend, also named Arlene.
Oh.
Arlene Kubasek. And through the years, 3 girls laughed a lot together.
Oh.
They laughed their way through Catholic elementary school.
Yep.
You gotta laugh through that or you cry. And all through Fenger High, where Pat was on the Titanet pom-pom squad.
Ooh.
Give me an A. Give me a B. They laughed as they sunbathed on the roof between the tavern and the funeral home, watching the people and the cars down on Michigan Avenue, which they called the Ave.
The Ave.
Pat and Arlene Kubasek could hardly stop laughing one night during their high school sophomore year. They went to the drive-in with 4 other girls, then sat in the car eating popcorn and rolling their hair into giant girlers.
Oh.
That's so, like, 60s. You could picture, like, Grease.
Yeah.
On the way back, they got lost 40 miles from home when they spotted a gas station. They were reluctant to stop for directions because their curlers had apparently made them look like creatures from Mars.
Oh.
Her friend said, Pat looks at us and says, "Oh, for crying out loud." She gets out of the car, slams the door, and found out from the guy where they were and how to get home from there. That's how they remembered Pat. Sweet, assertive, funny, and full of life.
Aww.
Pat was 20 on the hot evening of July 13th when Arlene dropped her off at the townhouse well before curfew, which was 10:30 p.m, except for 2 nights a week, the women were allowed to stay out till 12:30 a.m. Pat asked if she wanted to come in for a coffee, but she replied no, she was too hot, too tired, and they'd see each other Friday to hang out. She waved and waited for Pat to go inside. The next morning, Pat's mother called her, worried. The radio said some nurses had been killed. The police wouldn't give out any information. Had Pat gotten in okay the night before? Arlene hurried to her car and drove to the townhouse. Police cameras, gawkers were everywhere, and someone said something about the bodies. She knew before she was officially told Pat was dead. The Matuseks wanted Pat to be buried in the clothes she would have worn for her upcoming graduation.
Oh.
This one fucking hurt my soul.
Yep.
So on the day after the murders, Pat's sister, Betty Jo, asked Arlene for a favour. Would Arlene go with her to the townhouse to get Pat's nursing cap and uniform?
Oh.
Police escorted them inside. Arlene said it was terrible. Remembering what she saw, the police didn't rush them, but they left as soon as they could.
Oh.
Betty Jo had one more request. She wanted to do Pat's hair and makeup for the funeral, and would Arlene help her? She wanted to make her sister look like her sister.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh, that hurts.
That one was the hardest. Together they helped prepare Pat's body for burial at the funeral home ran by Arlene Baskey's dad next door to her dad's bar.
Oh.
So then we have Pamela Lee Wilkening. A few days before she died, Pam called her mother to say she couldn't come visit that weekend. Her graduation from nursing school was less than a month away. Exams were coming up and she needed to stay at her townhouse in the city to study.
Oh.
It's just ones like that. You're like, one little thing.
Just go.
Yeah.
Just go to see your mum and you wouldn't have been moited.
One little thing would have changed everything. My lips are so
Yeah.
fucking dry. Oh, my hair's everywhere.
Don't worry, so's mine.
Pam had been quiet, studious, and decisive since she was a girl in South suburban Lansing. Her family, her father John, a pipe fitter, her mother Lena, a homemaker born in Germany, and her only sibling Jack lived in a small one-story brick Cape Cod on Commercial Avenue. It was a close-knit community where almost no one locked their doors. Her childhood resume wasn't flashy. Brownie, Girl Scouts, and high school nursing club. At Thornton Fractional South High School, she attended almost every basketball and football game with her closest girlfriends, but she didn't play sports. She also worked part-time at a bakery. I would get so fat if I worked at a bakery.
Me too.
One for me, one for you. One for me, one for you.
1 for you, 7 for me.
I used to work at the bakery at school and it was dangerous, the amount of truffles I ate.
Oh.
Once remarking on her diligence and steady temper, her brother told her she'd make a good military nurse.
Oh, yeah?
Nursing school exposed Pam and her classmates to life's wide range of joy and trouble. By the time they were in their 3rd year, they had helped deliver babies, treated sick children, and watched people die.
Yeah.
You'd see the whole fucking life cycle as a nurse and doctor.
Yep.
Like, it's crazy. As part of their psychiatric rotation, they dealt with mentally disturbed patients. During one of Pam's shifts, a patient slugged her. She hit her head against a brick wall and suffered a slight concussion.
Aww.
But undeterred, she returned to nursing. That's why I think I read it was Pam that was like, she either spat in his face and was like, I'm going to fucking remember your face.
Yeah.
Or I'm pretty sure it was Pam. Correct me if I'm wrong if you know what fucking article source I'm talking about.
Which article you read?
I remember like the first time I researched Richard Speck.
Yeah.
And someone said something to him. And then, yeah, I just couldn't find it again. I was very tired last night. Maybe I just went through a few more articles. Among Pam's favourite pleasures was watching Jack, who was 7 years older, race cars. On a June day in 1966, when she was 20, she went to one of his races and afterward waved goodbye. See you next week, he said. The next time he saw her, her body was on the gurney behind a window in the coroner's office.
Oh.
Her brother Jack recalled the terrible summer of 1966. Much of what he remembered is conspicuously small. Politicians delivering food to the wake, the time he spent unpacking the food, repacking it, a funeral parlour jammed with mourners, losing his parking spot as he carted all the food here and there, and the mail. He'll never forget the cards and letters that flooded in from strangers all over the world. The mailman would have to bring them in boxes. His mother filed them away neatly along with the pictures and newspaper clippings. For years, Pam's name, along with those of her housemates, were in the paper 2 or 3 times a week, or so it seemed to Jack, and always attached to the name of the man who killed her. Speck's death came as a relief to the Wilkening and to the family of the other women he killed. No more parole hearings, no more fear that he might be released. And yet news of Speck continued to haunt them. In 1996, 5 years after he had died, the video surfaced of Speck in prison doing drugs and engaging in lewd acts with other prisoners. After it was aired on TV, Wilkening obtained a copy of the video. He watched it once and then hurled it into a corner. Imagine that, just seeing your fucking sister's killer, like, if they knew how much fun I was having in here. It's like, shut up, loser, with your titties.
Yeah, you take your titties elsewhere.
Take your titties and throw them into the fan.
With the bird.
Poor birdie. Melita Orlando Gargula. Melita grew up on the island of Mindoro. In that, the land of bananas, rice and coconut. She helped raise 8 younger siblings, swam in the river, and was good enough in school to be admitted into the nursing program at Alano University in the big city of Manila. Oh, Manila. Duh. Wow. In the spring of 1966, she stepped into an airplane bound for Chicago. On board was another exchange student, Cora Amiro, whom she had met a month or so earlier when the two were destined to be roommates in a townhouse in Chicago's South Side. According to the news accounts published at the time, Melita was 23, was quiet, shy, hardworking, efficient, pretty, and blessed with a rich singing voice. In the townhouse, she was known to sing while doing dishes or the laundry. At Southside Chicago Community Hospital, she earned $350 a month, much of which she sent back to the Philippines, and like the other exchange nurses, she wrote a lot of letters. Shortly before she died, she wrote a friend about a trip to Wisconsin. A few days later, 8,000 miles from her native land, Merletta Gargulo and Valentina Passion were memorialized at a mass led by Archbishop John Cody, but no immediate relatives were there. When their bodies were flown back to Manila, however, more than 100 people, relatives and friends, waited in the rain to watch their caskets unload from the airliner and hefted into funeral coaches. So fucking sad. Valentina Passion. In May 1966, Valentina boarded an airplane boarded an airplane in the Philippines headed for Chicago. Tina, as her family called her, had graduated the year before, among the top 10 nursing students in her class at Manila Central University. She promptly planned a trip to the United States, but passport problems twice forced her to postpone. One of her sisters would later say the delay may have been a sign that God didn't want her to leave. Tina was a part of the wave of Filipina exchange nurses who came to the United States in that era to learn new things, make friends, and most of all, to work. The United States needed nurses, and the Filipinas helped relieve the shortage. 8,000 miles from home, they could earn decent money, and many like Tina sent much of it back to their families. On that Monday, she was taken to a townhouse on East 100th Street, rented by her new employer. There she joined two other Filipina exchange students, Merletta and Cora, who had arrived a few days earlier. The American student nurses and the exchange nurses never really grew close, but from the outset they were friendly. Shortly after the Filipina women arrived, the Chicago women threw them a welcome party, and over the next few weeks helped them learn their way around the city. Through the end of spring and on into summer, Tina and her Filipina friends were sometimes spotted nearby, walking to a nearby shopping centre, and they took occasional field trips, but they spent a lot of their non-working time in the townhouse, frequently writing letters home. These poor girls, come to a country for a better opportunity.
Yeah.
And then bang, some little scrawny fucking rat mole face looking weasel.
Yeah, that.
According to a 1966 Life magazine story, Tina often mentioned money in her letters. "If I send you money, will you be able to fix the house?" she said in one. She also wrote about Chicago's weather, which she described in one letter as really terrible. But work is easier than in the Philippine Islands. Only the patients are as big as water buffalo.
Oh, shit.
Another time, according to a different news account, Tina wrote her sister saying she wished she could live in Chicago forever. And our last nurse we'll talk about is Cora. Cora came from Batangas, a province south of Manila, known for its volcano, its beaches, and the Bali song, a traditional folding pocket knife in which the blade can be concealed.
Oh, yep.
Her village was small, about 200 people, and her family was large, with 8 kids. Everyone's got 7 or 8 kids in this. Jesus Christ. After graduating from Far Eastern University in Manila, she worked for a couple of years as a staff nurse, then applied for work in the United States. She accepted an assignment at South Chicago Community Hospital and landed at O'Hare Airport on May 1st, 1966. Life in a new country must have brought surprises, but it was hardly dramatic. She worked at the hospital from 7 a.m. until 3:30 p.m. Like other Filipina nurses, she sent money home. Wednesday, July 13th, began as an ordinary day. She worked her regular shift, rode the hospital shuttle back to downtown, ate an early supper with Merletta and Tina, took a nap, washed clothes in the bathroom sink, hung them to dry in the basement, sat down to write letters as she was homesick. She had a busy fucking day.
Yeah.
Took a nap, did washing, had dinner. Around 10:30 p.m. when she went upstairs to bed in the high bunk in the room that she shared with Meletta, half an hour later she heard 4 knocks at the bedroom door. Since the trial, she's rarely spoken to the media, though in a 1970 court hearing, she described her fear of that night, of being alone, and of a knock on the door. Oh, imagine just being triggered by door knocking.
Yeah. No, thank you.
No, thank you. After the trial, she went home to the Philippines and got a job as a nurse and was elected to the town council of her hometown of San Luis. She married Alberto Atenza.
Huh?
And then with her husband, a lawyer,
Ooh.
moved back to the United States. According to news accounts at the time, she thought it was a safer place to raise a family.
Oh.
For many years, she worked as a nurse at Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C. And this is 2016, but now at 73, she has 2 children and 7 grandchildren.
Oh.
Imagine telling your grandchildren that.
Yeah.
Listen up, grandchildren, I've got a fucking story for you.
Do I ever?
Have you heard of Richard Speck? Oh, but that is
Wild.
the case of Richard Speck murdering the 8 student nurses in Chicago.
Illinois.
Illinois. I think they should just get rid of the S on the end of it. It's silly.
Yeah.
It's unnecessary, guys. But yes, thank you for listening to this very long episode. If you've stuck around this long.
If you made it this far, thank you.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I don't know where we'll be next week because we have no script because the computer fucked up.
It didn't record.
It didn't record. So
And
we
give
will.
up.
It'll probably be Australia, I reckon.
Oh, yeah.
We're back in Australia with another unsolved.
No. Stop with the unsolved. I don't like it.
This one I've been waiting for a while to do this one again. So
Ugh.
we're in, back in Australia with a probably unsolved one. By next week I'll be like, we're in America and it's a solved case.
Good. At least it's solved.
But yes, we will catch you next week. Thank you for listening. Oh, you can follow us on Instagram at DisorganisedDetectives. Or if you'd like to send us a message or a case suggestion, I was going to say request or submission, you can email us at disorganiseddetectives@gmail.com. And if you'd like to, if you're on Apple, if you'd like to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review, that'd be lovely.
That'd be awesome.
It'll put us on the Apple charts and then other people can find us.
Yay.
And listen to our nearly 2-hour episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is going to be our longest episode ever, but oh well. You
That'll
can
do, donkey.
do your cleaning while you listen to it.
Yeah.
That's what I do. But yeah, we'll catch you next week. Bye.
Bye.